I think we need to start. So good morning, everyone. So are you able to hear me correctly?
Yes.
Yes,
okay.
sir.
And there, we had a question, some questions to work from the tutorials. Yes, so we had some questions to work. And I expect that when you're working out the questions of the tutorial, so you have to write down the answers on your laptop or in some copybook. Okay, but you really need to make some effort to really write down. You have to make the effort to write down the answers correctly. Okay, so please take some time, whether you're writing them, the questions and answers in a copybook, or whether it's on your laptop on a Word document. But you got to take some time to work out the questions. So let us start with this. I'm going to share my screen and we have a look at the questions. These were quite straightforward questions, but anyway, even the first question, I think you really need to kind of remember the steps and write down them in a copybook or some on your laptop on a Word document, perhaps. Okay, so let me share my screen and we proceed. Okay, so let us see this. And yesterday, I've already also explained the assignment that was due. Okay, so those who were absent yesterday, I think you need to take some time, have a look at the assignment. And also yesterday, we discussed about the fact that you have to form groups. Okay, so you have to form your groups. So let's have a look at the tutorial that's meant for today. Quite straightforward tutorial, but we need to take some time to really understand these concepts and to work out the questions. So with the help of a diagram, explain each of the following steps, each of the steps in requirements engineering cycle. So yesterday we saw that, and just like software engineering, which is some kind of systematic approach, whereby there are a number of steps, a number of processes, even in requirements engineering, you will be having a number of tasks. Okay, so these would be tasks or steps or different milestones. So explain. Here, when you have a look at the question itself, of course, this is going to depend upon the number of marks that's given. For example, let's say you have such a question over 7 marks. But you can have such a question over 14 marks as well. So then you will have to perhaps draw the diagram that we saw yesterday with the 7 tasks. And then you kind of explain and elaborate on each of the different steps or tasks. Okay, so always remember that when you're answering a question, have a look at the number of marks that's given. But here, I think it's mentioned explain. Okay, so you cannot like just list. I've always been mentioning this, that there is a difference between explain and list, describe, compare and contrast, highlight. Okay, so pay attention to the word that's given here. It's mentioned explain. So you will have to give the 7 steps, and then you will have to explain each of these 7 steps in order. So can we have someone to answer this question? Any volunteer? Any volunteer to answer this question?
Yes.
Yes, please go ahead.
So the first step is inception.
Yes.
In this stage, all basic questions are asked on how to proceed with the task or steps required to complete the task.
Yes.
And the second step is elicitation. In this stage, requirements are gathered from stakeholders.
Yes.
And the third stage is elaboration. In this stage, requirements that have been stated and gathered are refined.
Yes.
And the fourth step is negotiation. In this stage, Developers and customers dwell on how to proceed with limited business resources.
Okay.
And the fifth step is specification. In this stage, the final work product is produced by the requirement engineer. And the sixth step is validation. In this
Yes.
phase, the work product produced as a result of requirements engineering are assessed for quality. And the last step is requirement management. In this phase, the project team performs a set of activities to identify, control, track, and establish a requirement at any time as the project proceeds.
Yes, very good. Very good. I think it's Farhan what we have been hearing. Okay, yes, so very good. So very well explained. So we have the 7 steps. Yesterday, I took some time to explain these 7 tasks or 7 steps. Okay, so very well explained. So you give a small brief of each of these steps I mentioned. So this is going to ensure that, for example, you're not missing any kind of requirements, or you find that even requirements, they're going to be validated in a step. Requirements, they're going to be elaborated in a step. We are going to have some negotiation in some step. Okay, so all this to ensure that the requirements engineering or the requirements collection process, if I may use this word, which is English, collection of the requirements, collecting the requirements, okay, it's going to happen smoothly, and you're not going to miss out perhaps some important concepts, miss out perhaps involvement of certain stakeholders, viewpoints of certain members. Okay, so this is why we have a systematic approach to gather requirements, and which is called the requirements engineering cycle. And Farhan, I think, correctly explained this as well. Very good. So question number 2 now. Give 3 practices in software development companies that impact on requirements capture. Okay, so this one is a bit broad. It's much more to make you think. So 3 practices in software development companies that can impact on requirements capture. Let me hear from you. Any volunteer to answer these questions? Yes, Kimlesh? Yes, please.
We have trouble to understand the requirements given by the user or customer. Secondly, we often record requirements in a disorganized manner. And lastly, we spend far too little time verifying what we do record.
We spend, last one, I'm not heard probably, spend too little time to?
Verifying about what we do record.
Okay, yes, and this is good. So we find that some valid answers given by our friend here, Kimlesh. So interesting. It's about the recording of the requirements. Any other volunteer that you would want to answer this question?
Yes, so failing to establish a solid foundation for the systems that the user wants to build.
Failing to establish a solid
foundation.
Yes, correct. You can say this as well.
Allowing change to control the company rather than establishing mechanisms to control change.
Yes, this is correct. This is correct as well. Okay. Any other answer you would want to give us?
Sir?
Yes.
Sometimes we go out of track, like out of the specific requirements.
We can go out of track and not abiding by the specific requirements. Yes, we can talk about this as well. It's correct. Any other?
And sir, overly optimistic budget or schedule, promising something that cannot be delivered within the available time allocated.
Yes, I think this is very good. Okay, I think from Girish Raj here. I was thinking about this. So one practice in software development companies that impact on requirements capture. Obviously, let's say, for example, you're going to start on a project and you're setting like very tight deadlines. Okay, you're setting very tight deadlines. So here, in some way, what you're doing is that you are encouraging the schedule to be compressed And eventually, so by doing so, what you're going to encourage is that you're going to encourage perhaps some important steps being omitted here. So requirements engineering, some people might view it as a phase where you don't have any kind of solid output. So it's going to perhaps really kind of deter a person from adopting the correct approach for software development and requirements capture. So yes, this is good. I think if you are setting too tight deadlines, over optimistic deadlines in terms of budget, in terms of time, in terms of staff, in some way, what you're doing is that you're discouraging person to really kind of perhaps document or report or record the requirements correctly. This is applicable for documentation as well. Okay, this is applicable for documentation. So in case, for example, you find that you are setting too tight deadlines, not enough resources, not enough budget, not enough personnel, in some way, you might kind of perhaps not encourage people to go for documentation as well. Okay, so that's why we need to ensure, I correctly mentioned, that the deadlines and the targets, they're not like over optimistic, like our friend mentioned, and which is correct. Any other answer you want to give for question number 2? Let me hear from you. Any other answer?
There might be disagreements between parties.
There might be disagreements. Okay, yes. There might be disagreements, and this can impact on the requirements capture process. Yes, we can talk about this, but here the word I think is more about practices. Okay, the word we understand disagreement can, for example, lead to requirements not being captured properly. But here, for example, what practices are we having in software development companies? So, which is common. Okay, so one of the things that's being encouraged in software development companies, and that would hinder the proper capture of requirements. Okay, so any other answer we can think of? Any other answers?
So we have answers in the chat box.
Okay, answers in the chat box. Let me check this. Gwendoline, yes, very good. So if you're encouraging your staff to jump right into software development process, like we've seen yesterday, it's good that you run fast, but you have to run fast in the correct direction. This is a practice which is true, and it does happen in the software development industry. Programmers and developers, software engineers are encouraged to have like output, and you're jumping right away in the making of the software. So this is not going to encourage perhaps a proper capture of requirements. This is acceptable. Bad project management can be, yes. The customer gives unnecessary detail rather than clarity of the overall system objective. Yes, this is correct by Oynish. But here, I think we've seen this concept yesterday. We have this level of abstraction. Okay, so this level of abstraction. So this is important. Not eliminating language ambiguity. Yes, it can be. Yes, correct. Lish. Bad project management, wrong assumption on requirements. We can accept this also. Can you check? Okay, so I think we can write it down. I think we already seen this from our friend Mohammed here. Yes, so wrong assumption was his answer. But here, I think the focus, when you're answering this question also, when you're answering such a question, so the focus is, what are practices in the software development industry that can hinder the correct capture of requirements? So what practice? So by practice, we would think about what is being done in the software development industry that's going to impact on requirements capture. One practice is good. One practice is that we try to compress schedules. You know, one practice, software development industries, companies, what they try to do is that they compress the schedule. So what's the schedule? The schedule would be about the duration of the project. Okay, the schedule would be about the duration of the project. But since, like, you know, the schedule has a number of implications. For example, you have a project, 100 programmers working on this. If you're compressing the schedule and you're saving 1 month, just imagine, instead of like 24 months, you're completing the project in 23 months. So what happens is that if the project is compressed by 1 month, so this would imply saving salary cost for 100 programmers. Let's say you're calculating an average of 30,000 rupees for one programmer. So 30,000 multiplied by 100 gives us 30,000, 300,000, 3 millions. So compressing the schedule by 1 month, for example, would mean an economy or a cost saving of 3 million rupees. So definitely, perhaps the directors of the company or even the stakeholders would want to kind of really compress the schedule by 1 month, and you're saving 3 million rupees. It's a practice that happens, but what is the impact? The impact might be that, okay, you can have like requirements not being captured properly. The impact can be that perhaps you're not documenting things properly. Okay, so one practice. Okay, so let's miscommunication. It can be. So perhaps lack of communication can lead to requirements not being captured properly. Let's correct Mohammed. Jumping right into making the software, I think is a very good answer. So this is one practice that at times is encouraged in the software and development industry. So here also, this is going to perhaps impact on requirements capture. Any other miscommunication that leads to wrong assumption? Yes, we can talk about this. So any other answer that you want to give us? I think we've been seeing very valid answers here. Any other answer? It's okay. Can we write about positive impacts? Impacts on requirements capture. Yes, you can write about this as well. You can say that, for example, it might be impacting positively, because here give free practices for development companies that hinder. If we talk about like hinder proper capture of requirements capture, so here we are talking about the negative aspects. But if we talk about impact, yes, of course we can have a positive impact, Juliana. So what are things that you are doing that can have a positive impact? Okay, so you can talk about, for example, proper communication. You can talk about proper project management and so on. Yes, you can view it the other way also. But of course, I think in the exam, if you're given such a question, it's going to be more specific about the words being used. So it's going to make perhaps impact negatively on requirements capture or impact positively. Is it okay for question number 2? Anything not clear? Any other thing you would want to add? Okay, it's good. Question number 2. And question number 3. So question number 3, in the elaboration phase, a use case scenario. Yesterday we saw a use case scenario, and if you recall, what we did was some kind of client interacting with perhaps a chef in a restaurant and the different processes. Okay, we've seen that we have actors, we have some kind of system boundary, then we have the processors. The processors will be the verbs. For example, you find like withdraw, check, deposit, transfer. Okay, so these are verbs. If we have a look at English, so these would be verbs. So these would like update, validate. Okay, so these would be the processors, and you represent them via some ellipse. Okay, so like with this symbol. And then you have the nouns, for example, customer, a database. These will be the actors of the system. Then we've not seen this yesterday, but you're going to do this in much more detail when you do software analysis and design or software modeling. Here, there's going to be what we call as some kind of generalization or specialization. And I'm sure you observe that the arrows is different. If you're seeing my screen, you find from the customer to withdraw, there is a straight line, but not this arrow. But from withdraw to the others, you'll find that there is this arrow. Okay, so we have not done this in detail, but you're going to learn eventually what is meant by generalization and what is meant by specialization. So this is where you got the word include. What is meant by this? For example, I'm not able to draw here on the screen. If I had a board, perhaps a blackboard, I would have drawn. But if you try to think about this, in Mauritius, we have doctors. Okay, you agree with this, doctors. But would you say that a pediatrician is a doctor? Yes, a pediatrician is a doctor. Would we say that, for example, cardiologist is a doctor? Yes. So what we find is perhaps that the pediatrician is a specialized version of the doctor. You agree with me? For example, this is where, for example, here I can include here on this process. If I'm just, of course, this is not a verb. This is doctor is not a verb. I cannot include it right away here. But it's just to show to you the process of generalization and specialization. So then I would have, for example, here doctor, and below I have a specialized instances of doctor, which would be like pediatrician, cardiologist, I don't know what can we think about, okay, surgeon, and so on. So these would be specialized. Okay, so in object-oriented programming, for example, if you're going to learn Java or if you're going to learn C++, so these object-oriented programming languages, then you're going to have much of these specialization. Specialization if you're moving towards a more specialized version. For example, the surgeon is a specialized version of the doctor. But if you're moving up, then we are going to talk about not specialization, but the reverse, which is generalization. If I try to think, let us try to think a bit about this. If I say, okay, we got vehicles here, vehicles. What are specialized instances of object vehicle? Anyone? What would be a specialized instance of the object vehicle? A car, exactly. A car is a specialized version of the instance, a vehicle of the object, specialized instance of the object vehicle. A bus can be a specialized instance of the object, a vehicle, a truck, a lorry, a van. Okay, so these would be a specialized instances of the object, which is that a vehicle. So you can move upwards also. If I say, for example, what is the generalized instance of an object, which is perhaps a car, then you would say a vehicle. So do you understand this concept? So this is basically what's depicted here when you have these kind of arrows. You're showing some kind of further interaction that you're going to have. And this is where also you have the word include. So let's have a look at this. So in the elaboration phase, the use case scenario, we've seen what's a use case scenario, is produced to better understand is used to better understand. Give me 1 minute. So have a look at the question we're going to correct in 1 minute. This question number 3. Yes, let's have a look at the question. So in the elaboration phase, the use case scenario is produced to better understand a feature. So an ATM uses a use case scenario as shown below. Write down the use case scenario. Use the template given in the lecture notes. So anyone who would want to give a try for this? Anyone? So here we're talking about an ATM machine. So what would be the actors according to you?
The customer.
Customer.
Yes,
Database.
good. And then
Database.
we can put the database or we can put the ATM on the other side. Yes. So what would be the operations? What would be the operations? We have an answer here.
The goal in context would be to set the system to allow customers to withdraw money once they input their personal details.
Okay. Okay. Yes.
Then the preconditions would be the system has been programmed to detect code inserted by the customer and to prompt for a password.
Okay. So the PIN is going to prompt for the PIN. Yes.
Then we would have a scenario. Customer insert code login, customer enters passcode, and customer selects amount to deposit or withdraw or transfer.
Okay. Yes. Yes, it's okay. So we have, thank you for your answer. So here, important, like I was mentioning, we need to understand the processes. So if you have to use an ATM, Okay, so if you have to use an ATM at the bank, what's the first step that you do? So you have to sit down and think, okay, what's going to happen? Do I put my PIN first and then I put my card, or do I put my card first and then my PIN? So then you understand, for example, after having input the PIN, would I get some menu from which I get to choose the operation I need to perform? Then you perform the operation. Then what happens after this? Okay, so like this, you should be able to think about the process. Okay, you should think about the process, and we can have a look at the answers from the chat. So the customer from Isha, the customer has to log into the database to validate his account. The customer use case includes deposit, cash withdrawal, cash check balance, and transfer money. Yes, database then updates the account and you can log out from the database. Okay, so here, just to make you think, I think Disha. Okay, so what she mentioned, I think is very important. So the database then update the account so that he can log out from the system. So we find that we need to have a process, which is that of perhaps update account. So this update account, when you're linking it to the actors, let's try to think about this, all of us. This update account, whereby when we are linking it to the actors, so do we link it to the user, or do we link it to the system, bank system, or do we link it to both? Update account.
System.
Only to the system. So bank account update is only to the system. Okay, only to the system, because you find that the customer cannot update the account. Okay, so you have to be careful. So you make the link only from update system, which is a process within this box, to the ATM system or to the bank system. Okay, so you have to be careful. So we get a number of interesting answers here. So now you enter PIN to log in, but before you enter PIN, you have to put the card. Okay, so put the card, put PIN, request. So we have, it needs to be in order also. So one thing that's important for you to understand. Let me go back to this example that we're talking about. What you find here is that, okay, what is shown here, the order also is important. Okay, the order also is important, because when you're moving down here, it shows the flow of operation. For example, login, you have to log in first before you deposit or you withdraw. So you cannot put login as a process which is down below. Okay, so you understand that, for example, login is going to happen at an early stage. Okay, so login and deposit, and then you withdraw, check balance, transfer, and so on. Okay, so this is important. Let me go back to the chat session that we were having. Okay, so we find access to menu, transaction, about the process by pressing the cancel key. Okay, so like we've seen, perhaps these would be some kind of exceptions. Okay, so exception, we have seen the word exception. Okay, so pressing the cancel key and so on. Withdraw, check balance. Okay, so yes, it is good. Okay, so you have to understand the process. There can be some exceptions where the PIN has been wrongly entered, card blocked by the ATM, amount of money that you're requesting is much greater than you got in the bank. Exceptions will be password incorrect or the PIN incorrect. A number of trials exceeded. amount greater than the fund. Yes, very good. Okay, very good. By Shita. So let us continue. So let me cover question number 4, and then I'll ask you to work out something for me. Briefly explain the steps involved in negotiation phase. Negotiation phase, and Isha, yes, your answer is good. Let me check the answer again. But always try to split this. Okay, don't put on a single sentence like deposit, withdraw, check balance, transfer money on one single sentence. You can put and split it. This is as per the concept of requirements, where you put all these operations on different lines, update and log out. Yes, it's okay. It's just that perhaps you need to really kind of split these operations and separate and put it separately. So briefly explain the steps involved in negotiation phase. Any volunteer?
So
Yes, please go ahead.
Requirements are ranked by customers, users, and stakeholders. Risks
Yes.
associated with each requirement are identified and analyzed.
Yes, good.
And firstly, the developer and the customer dwell on how to proceed with the project with limited business resources.
Okay, yes, very good. Okay, so this is very good. So we've seen that we have concepts of risk, we have stakeholders, and so on. So this question is directly from your notes, and you can refer to the negotiation phase, which is important, because here we also see that different stakeholders have different viewpoints. Okay, and at times you find that perhaps we need to reach to some kind of compromise here. Okay, we will need to reach to some kind of compromise. So any question from this tutorial? Any question from this tutorial? Anything that's not clear? Anything that you would like me to explain again? No? Any question that you have from this?
Sir?
Yes.
For the last question, what can be the amount of marks associated with it?
So what can be the amount of marks?
Yes.
For example, it can be like 4 marks. Okay, it can be like 4 marks. And if it is 4 marks, if for such a question you get like 4 marks, then you have to understand that we have some kind of marking scheme. So the marking scheme would expect that you are giving like 4 points. You can talk about race, you can talk about viewpoints, you can talk about prioritization, and so on. So you can talk about 4 items here. Okay, it can be like 4 marks, can be 3 marks, can be 5 marks. So perhaps the number of marks that would be given is going to be important. Okay, so you refer to the number of marks, and in line with this, then you write down the answer.
Good, thanks.
That'll be okay. It's okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other question you have? I'm going to ask you to work out something for me in case you don't have any question. But in the meantime, in case you got any question or anything not clear, anything you would want some clarification, you can type in the chat and I'll respond to that. But in the meantime, I will ask you to take some 5 minutes. You can note down the question if you want. Note down the question. I'm going to ask you to work it right now. So draw a use case diagram. Okay, draw a use case diagram for a client to take an appointment with the dentist. Okay, so let's say tomorrow you have the scenario is as such. You got to consult a dentist, but before you consult the dentist, you will have to seek an appointment with the receptionist. Okay, so you have me. I have, let's say, to schedule a visit to the dentist, so I have to phone the receptionist. I have to confirm the availability. So you understand the process. So do you think you can work out some use case around this concept? Identify what will be the actors, identify what will be the processes, and draw a use case. So let's do this for some 5 minutes, and then we're going to see. I'm going to see you back in 5 minutes. So a client seeking an appointment with the dentist through the receptionist. Okay, so 5 minutes. So here we've seen what I think if you got such a question to think about. So what would be the actors?
The client and the receptionist.
Client, receptionist, and also what?
Dentist.
Dentist. Okay, so here we have to understand that we got like 3 actors. So 3 stakeholders, 3 actors. We got the client, we got the doctor, which is the dentist, and we got the receptionist. For example, and now you understand what would be the processes that you can think of. The processes.
Register.
I need to register on the system. Okay, yes, perhaps I can need to register. So here you have different ways of viewing it. You have different ways of viewing it. One scenario is I take the phone, I'm going to phone the receptionist. Okay, so different viewpoints and different scenarios you can think of it. But one scenario is that I can, for example, pick up the phone, I phone the receptionist. So client, phone, receptionist on the other end. So we have the phone, which is linking both the client and the receptionist. Okay, so this is one process. Now, I'm going to check for the availability, exactly. So some of you mentioned like, you got to check the availability. You check availability with whom? The receptionist is going to check availability with whom?
Dentist.
With the dentist. Okay, with the dentist. So a receptionist. So that's why perhaps on the left, I'm trying to explain this. I'm not drawing it here. On the left, you can have client. On the right, you can have perhaps the receptionist. Okay, so, or you can put the doctor also on another end. So you have to understand that the confirmed availability is going to be between the dentist and the receptionist. Okay, so then if confirmed, then you can book an appointment. So like this, it's important that you think about the process. So what are the steps involved here? What are the steps involved? So who are the parties involved? So this is the way I think you need to think. Very important, you need to think. So you imagine the scenario. For example, if I have to book an appointment with a dentist, so I'm going to pick up the phone, I'm going to talk to the receptionist. So I try to model this in the use case, myself, the client. At the end, you got a receptionist. You're doing this phone conversation. Then the receptionist has to confirm availability with the doctor. Okay, so on one hand, you got the receptionist, and then the dentist on the other hand. So I confirm availability. Then eventually you got to kind of confirm the appointment.
Sir?
Yes.
I don't know. I'm only seeing your settings on sound.
Yes, exactly. So I'm not drawing it. Okay, I'm not drawing it. It's true that I'm not drawing it. So we're just trying to discuss. I'm not drawing the diagram here. So it's just that we are thinking about it. Is it okay?
Can we add as a doctor's agenda?
Yes, you can. So like I was mentioning here, again, you have different levels of abstraction. This is when we try to apply what we have learned into some kind of example. We have a different level of abstractions. Okay, so at times you'll find we start with what we call as a high-level use case diagram. So whereby we show the main components. Of course, how would a receptionist check the availability of the dentist? She or he, the receptionist, will have to check the agenda of the doctor. Okay, so yes, we can include this in perhaps a more refined or exploded version of the use case. Yes, this is good. What you mentioned is correct. So this is all going to make us kind of think. Okay, we are thinking about this, but first we need to kind of get the scenario, we get the requirements, and we get the process. We try to think about the processes. We kind of model the system. This is where we talk about modeling the system. And this use case diagram can help us model the system. So anything you would want to add concerning this? Anything you want to add? If the dentist is not available, ask for a referral dentist. Yes, we can talk about this. This can be, for example, one possible outcome of the scenario. Update calendar of the scheduling, yes. So after, for example, the receptionist has confirmed a specific schedule, then we need to update the agenda or the calendar of the dentist. Yes, good, Rushta. Record visit information. So obviously, so who is going to record the visit information? Okay, so this is the way we really need to think about. So who is going to record the visit information? Is it going to be the doctor who is going to record the visit information? Is it going to be the patient? No, it's going to be the receptionist. So we have a process which is record visit information. And this is linked to the actor, which is that of the receptionist. It's okay? Any question that you have? Question?
No.
No? So perhaps our last example on this scheduling visit with the dentist is just to make us think about the scenario, and from the scenario, how you capture the requirements and how would you model this? How would you then try to incorporate additional details? Okay, so these are things we need to learn eventually. Okay. If you don't have any questions, then we're going to stop here today. And next week is your student week. Okay, so I think no lectures next week. So we're going to meet back next year. Okay, so we're going to meet again next year. So I take this opportunity to wish you a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Okay, so take care and we meet next year. Okay, bye everyone.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye, sir.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
sir.
Bye,
See you too.
Goodbye, sir.
Goodbye. Enjoy your holidays.
Thank you, sir. Goodbye.
You too, sir.